Good. Before we start tonight, we acknowledge that right across this country, we're dialing in on the stolen Aboriginal lands of the many different peoples upon which inhabited this country before white settlement. The Migrant Workers Centre is located on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, and we pay our respects to their elders past, present, and those emerging. We also offer the respects to traditional owners upon the lands of which you're dialing in from tonight, wherever they may be. This land was stolen, and we extend our solidarity and our ongoing support to the campaign against colonialism and for sovereignty and self-determination. Well, welcome back to those of you that joined us in either of the previous two nights, and a very warm welcome to you if you're joining us for the very first time. Over the last two nights, we've explored the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, its countermeasures, and the prospects for migrant workers in the looming recession. Tonight, we'll look at the failures of the existing social safety net and their failures to protect migrant workers, and how migrant workers themselves have created innovative pathways and taken upon themselves to support each other through this pandemic. We'll also hear about the fight for a fairer migration system and work to extend the existing social safety net to everybody. My name is Matt Kunkel. I'm the director of the Migrant Workers Centre, and I'll be your chair for tonight's discussion. As we hear from another great panel, and then turn our attention to the draft conference statement before hearing closing remarks from Jenny Tran on behalf of the conference sponsors, Maurice Blackburn. The chat tonight is open. You can see on the side of the screen there, so you can contribute to the conversation and ask questions of the panel. And later we'll be sharing a link to a feedback form. Feedback about this conference and the draft conference statement is really important to us. This statement will act as a guiding statement and guiding document for the Migrant Workers Centre's work and campaigns in 2021. This year's undoubtedly been one of the hardest for the nation's migrant communities and temporary visa holders. Excluded from federal government income support, many have been forced to rely on charity just to survive. Yet it's also been a year where we've seen an inspiring show of solidarity from both the wider community and amongst migrants themselves. And despite the federal government's attempts to starve migrants out of Australia, many have found ways of plugging the holes in the absence of this social safety net. One such organisation that's done this is NOMIT, the Network of Italians in Melbourne. NOMIT filled the gap in the social safety net by creating a microcredit program during the pandemic. The program not only helped people in dire situations, but also organised them into the community. To tell us more is our first speaker, Enrico Moscon, who is a member of the board of NOMIT and works at the Italian consulate in Melbourne. He holds a bachelor's degree in international relations and a master's in economics and public policy from the University of Bologna. And he does research on social and economic issues. Welcome, Enrico.
Oh, thanks, Matt. Thanks, everybody, for attending today. So let me start by introducing NOMIT. NOMIT is a community group of Italian migrants. Since 2013, we've been promoting social inclusion of newly arrived migrants, particularly by sharing information about their rights in the workplace. We have run every year an event called Work in Progress, an informative event to raise awareness about the chronic issues migrant workers face in this country, and the very same issue we have been discussing actually in this conference. So, of course, as we all know, as Matt already said, migrant workers were extremely vulnerable already, even before the pandemic, and the pandemic hit them particularly hard. And when the pandemic hit, we as NOMIT were aware of this vulnerability, and we knew, how the visa system, how the work restriction, how the job insecurity, how the unequal access to social security would affect migrant workers. And all this was exacerbated by the government decision to draw a line. Yesterday, we were talking about lying, about divisions, and the decision of the government to leave some vulnerable groups behind. Well, there was a turning point for us as NOMIT, and so we reacted to that. So what we did, we called upon the community, asking for help to provide support to the most vulnerable part of this community, so the more recent arrived migrants, temporary visa holders mainly. And they were excluded by any sort of social security I think I missed a few skipping the slides. We can probably go on a little bit. Yeah, that'd be perfect. And actually, we can move just to the next slide as well. The community, the response from the community was amazing. So there was a fundraising event hosted by an Italian community radio on Easter Monday this year, and we collected $100,000 in a day, made mainly of very small donations by people, Italian, that had been living in Australia for many, many years. There was an incredible response, and that was the beginning, just the beginning of our commitment during this pandemic. So as a board of NOMIT, so we came up with two main instruments to provide financial support, mainly financial support to temporary migrants. We didn't just do that, we also provide them with information, constantly information about how the situation was evolving with lockdown. And we also give them access to Italian-speaking mental health professionals. But I mean, of course, I want to talk a bit more deeply about the two financial instrument we developed. So the first one is called Lampo. Lampo is the Italian word for flash. And so it means it actually was an immediate sort of a support, $100 donation, a sort of a temporary relief for these many temporary visa holder migrant workers that most of the time cannot even meet during the long month of the lockdown, cannot meet the basic needs, cannot pay for the grocery, to decide whether to use their little savings to pay for rent, to pay for groceries. And so there was, as I said, a temporary relief. Just very quickly, I'd like to say that Lampo, for us of NOMIT, is also the name of a partisan that we met just before the pandemic. He's an Italian partisan. He now lives in Australia, but he fought during the resistance in the Second World War. And it's a symbol of migrants that fought for surviving in Australia during this pandemic. So for us, it's a really meaningful symbol. So basically, just very quickly, to assess this sort of support, financial support, we developed an online form. And well, the only eligibility criteria really was to be a temporary visa holder and have lost your job or have senior hours cap. And unfortunately, there was a very common combination of criteria. And so every single person that registered with NOMIT, with this project of NOMIT, they were called back, usually between 24 to 48 hours. And so we had as well the chance to talk with them and to listen to their stories. And I'm gonna go back to this later. So if you can move, Gabriel, to the next slide, I'm gonna explain to you Mano. Mano is the second instrument we came up. Mano is the Italian word for hand, but it is also an acronym. It stands for mutual aid, no obligations. It's a $500 free loan scheme. The recipient of this loan can return it in full or in part, if and when their situation will be comfortable to do so. This means that there is no time frame to return the loan and there is no obligation to do so. But of course, we hope they'll be able to do so, because this means that their situation will have improved. They will be back on track. They will have not only a decent work, but also some savings. They'll be able to meet the very high expenses the temporary visa holder has to pay for the visas to stay in this country. And what is, in order to get Mano very quickly, what we need, we ask for some documents, of course, to prove their visa status and their financials. And there was also a quick interview, usually with two members of NOMIT and the recipients. And the interview was mainly about sharing the concept underpinning Mano. So Mano, it's really important for us, and it has proved itself as a very important instrument, because it entails solidarity, it sort of shares solidarity by keeping the recipients connected to our community. And this was very important during a pandemic, considering that many migrant workers here, they don't have families, they don't have connection, they don't have other sort of support. So to feel like you are part of something, to feel that somebody is actually caring for you, that was a very important, I think, achievement of this program. And the second very important thing about Mano is that it avoids the stigma for the recipient, the stigma of asking for a donation, because it is not a donation, it's a loan. So it gives the recipient the opportunity to return it and to help someone else. So when it will be able to return the money, this money will be used to help someone else, so another migrant worker facing a hard time. So Mano has a sort of, I say definitely has a human side to it. And indeed, during a period stretching from middle of April to the end of August, over 200 people registered with this project. So we had the chance to talk with them many times, sometimes because we, of course, as the pandemic continued, we called them again, and we most of the time found out that the situation was actually getting worse, of course, as the lockdown continued. So we sort of created a trustful relationship with them. As a matter of fact, some of them are still with us today with NOMIT. They are organizing themselves in action groups to discuss about issues relating to the stay in Australia, to the future in this country. And so this is a very good outcome of Mano. We can just move to the next slide, please, as well. So as I said, so we provide financial support, but financial support is only a part of the problem, and it's only a part of the solution, because these temporary migrants, we listen to the story of they had to fight to survive during this pandemic. It was important for them to know that somebody was caring for them, because most of the time they felt abandoned by Australia, abandoned by the government. This was very touching to hear every time. So we're talking about people that most of the time spent years in this country, visas after visas, temporary visa after temporary visa, working in here, trying to find a way to become a permanent resident of Australia, trying to build a career here, working hard and studying. Most of the time it was very hard for them to ask for money. So we have this image of people queuing for money, queuing for food or asking for money, but what we maybe sometimes is not evident is that we actually deprive these people of their dignity, because they never had to ask for support before, and they always work hard, they always rely on themselves, and it was very difficult for them to ask for money. Some of them, I always like to say that when I talk about this project, they told to us, look, I still have $1,000 in my bank account. I can't resist another week. I can't resist another month. So just try to help someone else in the meanwhile. This is an incredible demonstration of solidarity coming from migrant workers, coming from migrants, coming from people struggling to survive with no certainty about the short-term future. And I think it's something really, really challenging to believe. That's what happened. And well, I wonder, how many people can imagine what it means to say something like that, to find yourself in such a situation. What I want to say to conclude, and maybe we can just move to the last slide. So as NOMIT, we would like Mano to become a more permanent scheme. So as explained yesterday very well by Alison, by Hassan, so migrant workers were very vulnerable during the pandemic, of course, and are also going to be very vulnerable during this recession. And they will be more exposed than ever to exploitation. And and this is going to happen until adequate reform are taken. So it is important to share this initiative, and we would like Mano to be there as a permanent scheme. We would like to discuss, of course, with all of you, how to implement this program. And because there will always be a need for migrant workers to have a support, to have a security safety net promoted by the community. So as a community, as Matt already said in the introduction, we feel the gap, the divisive gap created by the policy, by the decision of the government. But at the same time, it is time for every level, for the government at every level in Australia to take action and implement reform to address this issue. So just to conclude, I want to refer to the conference statement and to the policy framework we have been designed with the committee. So every worker pay taxes, contribute to Australian society, and they should have equal access to social security. Their health and safety should be guaranteed with no discrimination of any sort. And we also need to fight, of course, to reform the visa system towards a more human face business system. So this pandemic has demonstrated how migrant communities can organize themselves and step up in solidarity, and it's also show how important migrant workers are for Australian society, how much they can contribute, how strong they are, because of the way they resisted during this month of the resistance there. So there is an opportunity, just to very conclude, this is the real conclusion, this is an opportunity to head out of this crisis by promoting a social, progressive economic recovery and by including. So it's no time to divide any longer, it's time to include. And it's time to listen to migrant workers. Thank you.
Thanks, Enrico, and some very poignant topics there at the back end there about how important it is to unite us all together, no matter where we're from or what visa we might hold. We're running a couple of minutes ahead of schedule, I think, so I might just ask one quick question about, I know there was some work done about linking the those Italian migrants that came to Australia a long time ago with those more recently arrived migrants through this pandemic. Is there any more information you might be able to share with us about how you went about that?
Well, of course, we're talking about two different generations. The migrants that actually from where the funds actually came. So the fundraising was hosted by an Italian community radio. So we're talking about a different generation. They came here after the Second World War. So that was very different back then in terms of migrating, of course. So they became permanent, but they're still connected to Italian. They're still connected to their country, especially through old-fashioned, let's say, old-fashioned medias like radio and newspapers. And I should say it was a surprise for us, but it's very important what happened. So they actually understood very quickly what was going to happen to these newly younger generation migrants. In a way, I think they may have felt like they could have been their nephews or their sons coming to Australia, finding themselves in such a situation. And it was an incredible demonstration of unity, I think, of the community. So different part of the community, a more stable one, helping the more insecure one in a hard time. So it was incredibly easy to understand this. And that's to now see what happened to migrant workers in this country means that you really want to close your eyes. You really want to be blind to it.
Thanks. Another great lesson there about making sure we reach out to all migrant communities, new and those that are more established, when we're trying to build a broad campaign of solidarity to improve things for everybody.